Good evening, everyone. Good evening, all the history enthusiasts. On behalf of our team, I warmly welcome you all today to this book review session in our ongoing lecture series, Āyām-e-Itihās, Exploring the Many Pasts. Over the past few weeks, the series has taken to a range of different areas of history. We have traveled to the Jammu Shivaliks, we have gone to Kachchh and explored the folk tradition. We have asked ourselves, is there any new history to be studied? We have also asked the question, who owns the past? And today we are here with yet another very interesting aspect of history. Today, we are going to review the work War and Weapon, an illustrated legacy of the Ahom military. And this review will be given by none other than the author of the book. We have the opportunity to explore various aspects of military traditions, of martial technologies. These wars, they are not just parts of history, they are important tools to understand society, to understand the past, to understand various aspects of science and technology, of metallurgy, of craftsmanship, and so many other things, and of historical change also. So I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's book review session. First of all, I would like to welcome the reviewer and the author of this book, Dr. Sauradeep Nath. Welcome, sir, to our History Enthusiast platform. I also welcome our honorary president, Shri Nandan Shastri ji. Welcome, sir. I also welcome our executive committee, advisory board, advisory council member, Dr. Vinay Kumar, sir, who has joined us from BHU today. Welcome, sir. I also welcome all the other executive and advisory council members of the history enthusiasts, including my dear friend, Ms. Nidhi Katti, founder vice president of the history enthusiasts. And most of all, I welcome all the viewers who are watching us live and who will be watching us later to this very interesting session today. With this, I now request Ms. Nidhi to introduce our author, Dr. Sauradeep Nath. Over to you, Nidhi.
Thank you, Manali, for the warm welcome. Dr. Sauradeep Nath, he serves as a senior researcher at the Foundation of Indian History and Cultural Research in Bangalore, Karnataka, and writes on the history and archaeology of the northeastern region of India. Formerly, he served as research associate at the Daimasa Heritage Museum and the Shuru Research Center in Maibang, Assam, and 2 consecutive terms as guest faculty in the Department of History at Assam University, Silchar. He completed his bachelor's degree from the Gurucharan University, Silchar, and obtained his master's and PhD from the Center for Archaeology and Museology at Assam University, Silchar. His research papers are published in journals such as Ancient Asia, Alekha, Journal of Indian History and Culture, etc. He has also presented papers at national and international seminars. Dr. Nath is passionate about traveling and unraveling the past through material remains of less explored areas in NER, that is North Eastern region of India. We are very happy to have Sauradeep today. By person, he is a very kind and very intellectual, which I have known through these 2-3 months. So we are very happy to have you on the platform of the history enthusiasts. Over to you, Sauradeep.
Namaskar everyone. Thank you, Nidhi, for such kind words. Nandanji, thank you. We had a few communication before, and meeting you in person, it's a delight in all total. Thank you, Manali, and everyone who would be listening to this wonderful lecture. So I'd like to start by making a small presentation because the study itself has been done in the museums. So if you visit Assam, if you visit the museums of Assam, the Assam State Museum, for example, or the district museums, then you are going to find multiple Ahom made weapons. So the study was primarily done on the museums, and the museum held artifacts that are the cannons or swords, spears, etc. So therefore, it's better for me to make a presentation so that I can guide you through the various types. When I say types, we are not just looking into the kind of weapons that are being elicited in the Burunjis. Burunjis are the Thai Ahom chronicles that the monarchs used to maintain. So it's better to have that material evidences in front of our eyes so that we can have a better understanding of what weapons were being used by the Ahoms. So please notify me if my screen is visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let us talk about Thai Ahom weapons, their types and description. But first of all, let us try to understand who the Thai Ahom were. So the Thai Ahom belong to the Thai ethnic group who dwell in the present day northeastern region of India. The term Thai refers to a vast ethnic group with different branches inhabiting an area extending from Assam in the Republic of India to the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region in China and Thailand in the deep south. So the Thai ethnicity and its various subgroups are known by varied regional names. For example, if we visit Myanmar, then they are often termed as Shaan, whereas in Thailand they are known as Thai. If you visit Laos, then they are called Lao, and in China they are known as Zhuang. Similarly, the Thai Mao branch, also known as Shan in Myanmar, that arrived in the Brahmaputra Valley in the 13th century CE, were given the name of Ahom, or simply today as we know them as Thai Ahom. The reason we call them Thai Ahom is because there are not just Ahoms who dwell in the Brahmaputra Valley, there are also other ethnic groups from the Thai ethnicity itself who live in the same area. For example, we will have Thai Phaike, Thai Aiton, etc. So to distinguish the other Thai ethnic group from the Thai Ahom, we are using the definite term, precise term for as Thai Ahom. So this is the group who came into the Brahmaputra Valley in the 13th century CE. To be exact, in 1228 CE, they crossed the Patkai Hill region, the Patkai Hills, and after which they entered into the Brahmaputra Valley. In the Brahmaputra Valley, they settled at a place called Charaideo, which also became their first capital. From Charaideo, eventually they started to expand their kingdom over the successive centuries. And in this very process, they came into conflict with many ethnic groups and kingdoms that were already established in the Brahmaputra Valley itself. So let me give you some example. So in the 13th century CE, we have two particular kingdoms that were dwelling in the Brahmaputra Valley. First, there was the Sotia kingdom, and then there was the Dimasa kingdom. So the Thai Ahoms eventually, initially, when they entered into the Brahmaputra Valley, their numerical strength was not much. And to be exactly, S.L. Barua in her work suggests that the total number of Thai Ahoms who entered into the Brahmaputra Valley in the 13th century would be not much than 9,000. So the 9,000 forces, strong forces, were not prominent enough to enter into conflict with the already established kingdoms of the Brahmaputra Valley, say it be the Sotias or the Dimasas, and therefore they restrained themselves. However, as the kingdom began to consolidate itself and began to amass more resources, it slowly and steadily started to enter into military armed engagement with those established kingdoms. Now we can talk about the military organization. So the Ahom organized their military in certain fractions. So there was first the infantry, second there was elephantry, the third was navy, the fourth was artillery, and fifth was cavalry. Now when we talk about cavalry, please do not misunderstand that the use or connotation of the term cavalry with the Turko Afghan or the Mughal cavalry, for instance, where there is much instances of pitched battles. So cavalry was very much restricted. However, there are multiple references in the Puranjis or the Thai Ahom chronicles that the Ahoms, particularly the Sukafa, under whose leadership the Thai Ahom migrated, he brought with him 300 horses. Now, whether these were horses or mule, we are not particularly sure. But more or less, let us just make an assumption that 300 horses came with the Sukafa himself. So there was a certain sort of cavalry utility by the Ahoms as well, not extensively as we see in case of the Turko Afghans or the Rajput, for instance, or the Mughals. However, we have pretty good evidences to suggest that infantry was being used, and so was elephantry, navy, and artillery. So let us look at some of these very aspects. So the base of the Ahom military system was the pike peasantry. What do we understand when we use the term pike peasantry? So the pike system was an ingenious system that the Ahom devised, and according to that, the adult male population between the ages of 16 to 50 provided compulsory military as well as civil services to the monarchy. The pikes were organized into the lowest unit called Got, and the number of this God fluctuated during the Ahom period. By Ahom period, I mean between 1228 CE to 1826 CE. So, for example, during Sukafa's advent, a god comprised of three men, as he brought 3,000, as he brought 3,000 motong dang, in which three persons used to cook their food, and by that we can infer that perhaps the god used to comprise of three men. Thus, however, according to Buranjis, particularly the Purani Assam Buranji, the Ahom monarch increased the number of god to four members in the 17th century CE. Yet again, we see that during the Ahom monarch Suramfa's reign, the god got reduced to three members. So, more or less, we can assume that the number of god comprised of between three to four members. Each god sent one pike for 3 months in a year for public works such as building houses, roads, forts, dam, etc. And at the same time, the remaining god cultivated the jointly held land, which Sharma in 1996 argues was 2.6 acre of paddy. Now that very paddy was termed as go mati. Besides, during the battle, this pike peasantry was mobilized as infantry soldiers. Thus, even without maintaining a regular paid armed forces, the Ahom monarchy mobilized one fourth of the pike for military usage or other activity. Meanwhile, the remaining non-serving pike acted as reserve force, which, if necessary, were mobilized by officers called kheldar. So the pikes were further grouped into a khel. Khel is the English rough translation of the word khel would be guild. So the pikes were organized into groups which were called khel based on an occupational and territorial basis and were placed under the charge of officers in hierarchy. So if you look into this very slide, you can see that there was a hierarchical organization. So at the bottom we had Rusao, who in Assamese is called Bora, who commanded 20 pikes. Above him was Rupak. Rupak is the Thai term, and Hoikia is the Assamese term. So they used to command 100 pikes. Above him was Ruring or Hazarika, who used to command 1,000 pikes. Above him was Phukin Mong, also known as Raskwa, and he used to command 3,000 pike. And at the top of the hierarchical order used to be Phukan, who used to command 6,000 pikes. So beside that, we also see that in the 18th century, a regular force with flint gun was also been devised by Suhit Fangfa under the behest of Purnananda Buragohain by an officer named Asan Bora. And lastly, we see that Arthashastra mentions that there were other soldiers apart from the Mula soldiers, such as the Atavi Bala was there, Mitra Bala was there. Similarly, we see that the Ahom also utilized multiple forces provided by the allied forces, allied kingdoms such as the Dimasas or the Sutiyas, or they also used to have forces from the ethnic groups, such as, let me give you an example. We can find the example of Rudrasima. So according to the stories that are being narrated in Buranjis, we see that during Rudrasima's campaign against the Dimasa kingdom, the Miri ethnic group provided their archers to assist the Ahoms in their campaign. Similarly, we see that during Suhumung's encounter with Turbak Khan in 1532 CE, the Dimasa sent their armed contingent to assist the Ahoms against the Turko-Afghan general. So the infantry composed of the pike peasantry. Second, there were allied forces, and in the 18th century, we also see the initiation of a regular standing force. The second component was the elephantry. So the topography of the Brahmaputra Valley is very much favorable uh, for fighting with the help of elephants. And elephants are not just today, but also back in the Ahom period was very uh, densely found in the hills as well as the forest of Assam. We have also a text called Hasti Vidanaya that was been composed during the reign of Sivasima, Ahom monarch Sivasima in the 18th century, that showcased that how much elephants were being cherished in the Ahom kingdom. So Baharistani Gayabi is a Persian text that was been translated by M.I. Bora during the 1930s. And if we go through that very work, we can see that it mentions that the Ahoms were using elephants, both male and female elephant, and they were also using elephants that were in that were in heat, or that were in non-heat stages. So the heated stage was called mast, and the non-heated stage was called husiar mast. The Ahom also knew the utility of a particular type of herb that was sarfil. It was used into male elephant to make them mast before battle, say for before 24 hours or so. And we also have different references in the Buranjis where elephant were being used extensively in warfare. So, for example, against the Turko-Afghan general Turbak Khan at Sola is the name of the place where the battle took, elephants were being used. In fact, the Ahom cherished the elephant to an extent that each of the elephants were also been given name. So, Buranjis, for example, mentioned the name of the elephants that actively participated in the battle, such as Pyrene, Paisu, Pairak, Paikai, etc. To maintain to maintain the elephants, there were also multiple officers who were put in charge, such as Hathi Barua. Hathi is the term for elephant. Hathi Barua was there. Hathi Barbarua was also there. Elephants were trained, and they were trained in a particular location. It was called Hathi Khok. And after the training, they were put into a separate area, and that area was called as Hathi Gahi. Similarly, if moving on to the next segment, we have Navy. The organization of the Navy started during the reign of Theokhamti in the 14th century CE. Theokhamti is the name of the Ahom monarch, and he organized the Navy under a new guild or khel, and that very guild was called Nauboicha. And Nauboicha was put under the command of a supervising officer, and he was called Nauboicha Fukan. However, during the reign of Susenkfa or Pratap Sima in the 16th century CE, early 16th century CE, we see that the navy was once again reorganized, and as such, in the western part of the kingdom, we see the development of a new officer called Pani Fukan, and he was in charge of that very naval forces. And on the eastern part of the kingdom, it was still retained by Naubochaya Fukan. Various types of boats were being mentioned in the Puranjis as well as in the Persian text, such as Maranao, Pachari, Hiloi Charnao. Hiloi Charnao is a kind of boat in which Hiloi or light artillery were being kept and, of course, utilized. Then there were Kusha, Kush, etc. There were many dockyards where there were dockyards, and dockyards were called nausal, where the boats were being not only made but also repaired if necessary. And if you go through the Buranjis, we find the mention of multiple nausal, that is dockyards, situated in titular places such as Rangpur, Gargaon, which used to be Ahom capitals, Majuli, the largest river island, Dergaon, etc. Moving on to the other last section, that is the artillery. The Ahoms, okay, we can talk about artillery here briefly, and then I can also talk about artillery. I can show you the images of the artillery. So the Ahoms used both heavy as well as light artillery. The heavy artillery was called Klang Lung in Thai language, or Bortop in Assamese, and the light artillery was called Klang Noi or Hiloi. If we go through the Persian text Baharistani Gayabi, we find that the Ahom were also using a kind of rocket, Chandraban. However, such a weapon is not been elicited in the Buranjis. So we might be skeptical in this very regard. However, let's just assume that the Ahoms were using three types of firearms. That was heavy artillery, light artillery, and a kind of rocket called Chandraban. And again, just like we saw in the case of Navy, there were particular khel or guild who were entrusted with the task of utilizing artillery. And that very guild or khel was called Hiloi Dhari. That is simply can be translated as one who uses Hiloi or firearm. Again, we see that the guild was once again divided into two sections, and one section was called Bajna Hiloidari Conver, and the other one was called Bitarwal Hiloidari Conver. These two guilds were composed of the Ahom princes who were called Conver. In fact, if you go to the work of Barpujari 1994, we find that the utility of firearm was restricted to an extent that only 10% of the Aho military were using artillery in combat. And most of the soldiers, that is the 90%, the bulk of the soldiers were utilizing edge weapons as well as bows and arrows. Now, proceeding towards the weapon, we have discussed so far who the Ahoms were. We have also covered the military organization of the Ahoms. Now, let us proceed to the various types of Ahom weapons. So, we can classify the Ahom weapon into ranged weapon, which would typically comprise of bows and arrows and firearms. Then would be the melee weapons, which would comprise of the swords, choppers. Choppers are typically called da. Da is a generic term used in not only in Assam but also throughout the northeastern region. We often use the term da for choppers, and varied forms of choppers were there. I will take you through the pictures as well. And then we have spears. Of course, again, different varieties of spears were also being utilized, each having their own unique functions. And then we had defensive weapons such as shield and a jacket called jati. Now, if you look at the picture, we can see the images of range weapon, particularly the Borto. Now, if we go through the literature, then we see that there were five types of heavy artillery that were being used by the Ahoms. And what were those five types of heavy artillery or Borto? One was called Bagmura Borto. The second was Biagom Borto. The third is Hatimuria Borto. Fourth is Mithaholong Borto. And five is Tubuki Borto. Talatal Ghar in Sibsagar exhibits five of the heavy artillery. You can see the images. Similarly, if you visit some of the museums, such as the District Museum in Jorhat, as well as District Museum in Jorhat, then you can find other specimens of heavy artillery as well. District Museum in Dibrugarh also exhibits some of the Borto, and so do District Museum in Mongolwar. District Museum in Tezpur also exhibits some of the Bortops. Here are some of the images from the Assam State Museum in Guwahati. A detailed documentation of all these very weapons are being provided in the work. Assam State Museum also has 3 large cannons of the Bortops. Okay. Considering the Bortop, there is a question. There is a question regarding when was it first utilized. If you go through the colonial works such as Wade 1800 as well as Gate 1905, then we see that they make an assumption saying that in 1532, with Turbak Khan's invasion, the Ahom learned the utility of Borto or firearm in general. However, that very theory, that very hypothesis has been reviewed by authors such as Barbarua, 1981, Asal Barua, etc. So accordingly, the Ahom utilized firearms prior to Turbak Khan invasion in 1532. And that very date goes to 1523. In 1523, the Ahoms were engaged in war with the Sotia kingdom. And in that very war, the Burunjis elicit that the Sotias were using firearms against the Ahoms. And from the Sotia kingdom, once they were defeated, the Ahoms acquired a particular type of heavy artillery called Mithaholong cannon. And Mithaholong cannon was later on used by the Ahoms in successive wars that they were engaged with against the Dimasas, or maybe later against the Turko-Afghans and the Mughals as well. Similarly, if we go through the Burunjis, we also see that in their war against the Dimasa kingdom, the Dimasas were also using firearms against the Ahoms. And that happened prior to the invasion of Turbak Khan in 1532. So now we can reason, we can infer from this very fact that in the northeastern region, there were already established kingdoms who were using firearms. And it also does not make any sense that the Ahoms were defeating the Dimasas as well as the Sotias in active combat without using firearms at all. So by that, we can make an inference that yes, the Ahoms were also utilizing firearms to an extent against adversaries such as the Sotias and the Dimasas kingdom, and that would be prior to the advent of the Turko-Afghan general Turbak Khan in 1532 CE. Now, considering the firearm department, Gogoi, in his thesis in 2017, he suggests that the organization started during the Ahom monarch Suhumung's reign in the 15th century CE. But the question is, why during Suhumung's reign? Why not before him? The reason is that during Suhumung's reign, the Ahom kingdom expanded in areas rich in mineral resources, including iron ore. Second was the foreign invasion, such as from the Turko-Afghans. And the third was the migration of the Sotia artisans to Ahom territory, which facilitated the creation and organization of firearm department. Saltpetre and sulfur were required to create the gunpowder, and for its procurement and preparation, the Ahom monarchy created separate guilds. One was called Khargaria. Khar means gunpowder. So Khargaria was there, who was engaged in manufacturing khar or gunpowder, and Khargaria Fukan and Khargaria Barua used to supervise it. And the gunpowder was stored in Khar Bandari at Gargaon, Rangpur, Kaliabar, etc. Similarly, there was another guild called Zakaria, and that was engaged in manufacturing solpatre. So solpatre was once manufactured in present day Shilakuti Bajani near Sipsagar and also near Moran. Even if we go through the work of Fatia Ibriya, and I quote, while about the quality of the Ahom made gunpowder, the Fatia Ibriya mentions that they make first rate gunpowder of which they procure the material from the imperial domain. Similarly, Trevenier also praises the Ahom gunpowder, saying, and I quote, iron guns and the gunpowder made in the country, that is the Ahom kingdom, were excellent. Now, if you look at the range weapon, and as I was saying, that there were three varieties of firearms that the Ahoms were utilizing. First was Bortop or heavy artillery. The second was Hiloi or light artillery. We can look at Hilois, for instance. So these are the two specimens of Hiloi that are being exhibited in District Museum, Jorhat. And speaking of the Hilois, the literature, if you go through the literature, then it mentions 11 varieties of it, such as Jambur, Ramsongi, Horu Hatnalia, Gathia, etc. The list keeps on going, so I'm just cutting it short. So these are the specimens of Hiloi that were being exhibited, that are being exhibited in the District Museum, Jorhat. Similarly, some other Hilois are also there, exhibited in Assam State Museum in Guwahati, District Museum in Mongoldoy, Dibrugarh also exhibits some of the Hilois. The Homtai Museum in Sipsagar exhibits different varieties of Hiloi. It can be seen in this very image. Now, speaking of, we have spoken about the range weapon, but the range weapon has no effect if we do not have cannonballs or no or guli. In Assamese, cannonballs are called guli, and the terminology of the guli depends on its shape and size, and it is often synonymized with the names of nuts and fruits. For example, we will have bogori guli. Bogori is the term for Indian jujube. Similarly, we have Tamul guli. Tamul is Areca nut. Yeah. So the name itself synonymized with nuts and berries, for instance. And these are the gulis are being exhibited in multiple museums in Assam. So Assam State Museum also has gulis, and so does District Museum in Jorhat. Range weapons. When we talk about range weapon, we not only had firearms, but we also had bows and arrows, and different varieties of bows were being utilized by the Ahoms, such as Karpai Denu, Bor Denu, Naga Denu, etc. Denu is the word used for bow. Similarly, different varieties of arrows were also being used, and the arrows were called kor. Some of the arrows used to have iron heads, others simply didn't. Some of the arrows also had or were also laden with poison, which was called beak, while others didn't. So different varieties of bows and arrows were also there. Now, speaking of the melee weapon, so you must have remembered so far that we have discussed about what are the various types of weapon. We have talked about that there were three different varieties of weapons that were being used by the Ahom, ranged weapons, and in ranged weapons we have so far discussed the heavy artillery, light artillery, as well as bows and arrows. Now the second section we will talk about melee weapon, and in melee weapon, if you might remember, we have mentioned about the utility of swords, spears, and choppers, which were called as da. And lastly, we will also talk about the defensive weapons. So when we talk about the melee weapon, the very first name that occurs into the mind of every Assamese is Hengdang. And Hengdang used to be the most prestigious of the Ahom swords. It was why prestigious? Because it was used by the Ahom royalty as well as general. There is this story that has been elicited in the Burunjis, in which we find mentioned that when the Bir Lasid Barfukan, the general who defeated Ram Singha in the Battle of Saraigat in 1671, when he was being given the command of the entire fleet, in other words, when he was made the Barfukan by the Ahom monarch Chakradhar Simha, he was being given a gold encrusted hangdang. So hangdang's utility was been reserved to Ahom royalty as well as the generals, and it was held in very high esteem. So it was not only used for martial purposes, but it was also used for ceremonial purposes. In which instance, particularly, we see that during the Ahom marriage ceremonies, a hangdang is being offered by the bride to the groom, and the vows are being taken by wielding that very hangdang. So, weapons, in other words, weapons such as hangdang not only had martial utility, but it also had ceremonial utilities and is also currently in use during Ahom marriages. You can see the specimen of a hangdang which has been displayed in the Assam State Museum in Guwahati. There are two specimens particularly. You can see both of the images. Uh, a further detail on Hengdang is also been provided in an article that I wrote, and it is available in academy.edu. If you want further information on it, you can please go and read that very paper. Again, the home were not only using one variety of sword, that is the hangdang, they were also using other varieties of it. So in District Museum Jorhat, if you visit, you can see one specimen of it. Similarly, in Ahom Time Museum in Sibsagar, there are various other varieties that have been displayed in the museum. Ahom Time Museum in Sibsagar, these two specimens are exhibited there. Now, interestingly, you can see a very striking feature in these swords. In the previous slide, if I go back, you can see that the swords have knuckle guard in it to protect the wielder's fingers. Similarly, if you look at this particular slide and the images exhibited here, you will see that there are no knuckle guards. So, what's the enigma behind it? According to oral tradition, not elicited in the Puranji, but if we go through the oral tradition, we find that the sword itself display the rank of the wielder. In other words, if a sword had knuckle guard in it, it meant that it was being wielded by a high-ranking commander, say a Saikia or Hazarika, or may even be a Bora. But if you look at the swords that are without a knuckle guard, then it would simply imply that it was being used by the pike peasantry or the low-ranking infantry. There are other varieties of swords as well. To make the handle of that very sword, they used to use not just wood but also horn and bones, of course, of animal. Now moving on to the next melee weapon, that is the da or chopper. If you go through the museums and if you also go through the Buranjis, then we see that the Ahoms are using variety of da or chopper. And among this, we can talk about Nakoida, Shikarada, and Bolikotada. There are two varieties of Nakoida that have been displayed in the Ahom Time Museum. You can have a look at to this very picture. It's a very unique weapon. Why unique? Because it was been used by soldiers from atop an elephant or horseback. The design of this very da is very unique in the sense it was used as a weapon to as a hurling weapon, but if dismounted then it can be used as a sword in the format of a sword as well in close combat. So it was a mid-range weapon as well as a close combat weapon. Other varieties of Nakoida, same varieties of Nakoida are also there, exhibited in the Ahom Time Museum in Sibsagar. And if you must be wondering, then you can see that the tail portion of it has a hollow section. In this very hollow section, a rope was being usually tied, and when it was being thrown from atop an elephant, it was being retrieved once again through that very rope. Uh, One more fact associated with Nakoida is that Nakoida is not typically an Ahom weapon. Nakoida was being used by the Dimasa ethnic group, and the Dimasa used to pay tribute to the Ahom in Nakoida. So the story goes like this: the Dimasas were being defeated by the Ahoms in 1536 CE, and once the Dimasas were being defeated, the Assam Buranji mentions that they were required to pay various articles as tribute to the Ahom monarchy. And among that very tribute articles, there used to be uh, pig iron, clothes, and nakoida. So from there, the Ahoms kept on receiving nakoida. Similarly, we also have another variety of chopper, and it is called shikarada. One is exhibited in District Museum, Mongoldoy. Shikarada once again was not been made by the Ahoms themselves, but it was procured by them from the Miris. So we can see that from the time of Ahom monarch Susengfa or Pratap Singha during the 16th century CE, the Ahoms came in conflict with the Miri ethnic group who used to live in the northern part in the northern part of the Brahmaputra river. And when the Miris were defeated, the Miris started to offer tribute to the Ahom monarchy, and one of those very tributary article included Shikara Da. So this specimen has been exhibited in the District Museum, Mongoldoy. Then we have another variety of weapon called Bolikota Da. Bolikota Da was not used for martial purposes, rather it was used to officiate sacrifices in temples as well as in festivals. So the Ahomtai Museum in Sibsagar exhibits two Bolikota Das, and you can see the images here. The Ahom practiced their own religion, and in various festivals such as Om Fa or Sai Fa, they used to officiate sacrifices to please the deities, and therefore we have the utility of Bolikotata. Similarly, we see that since the time of Ahom monarch Jaida Simha, Sanatan Dharma was being adopted by the Ahom royalty. And as such, we see that during the heyday of the Ahom monarchy, during the time of Siva Simha, we see that Shaktism became more prominent among the monarchy, and therefore they were using Boligotada to make sacrifices to the deities. Both Shakti and Shiva were being worshipped through sacrifices. Similarly, District Museum Tezpur also exhibits one Boligotada, and Shimanta Pankadev Kalakshetra in Guwahati also has another variety of Boligotada. These were once again, not been used in active combat. So we have covered swords. We have also covered choppers or da. Now we can talk about another group of melee weapon, that is the spear. So we have three varieties of spear. One was called zati or flat spear, barsha or leaves shaped spear, and kapor or multi-barb spear. Obviously, these three specimens could be found in the museums, and therefore I really cited only the names of these particular three spears. There were also many other varieties. Regarding the spear, the District Museum in Jorhat, you can have a look into one of the specimen, and District Museum in Mongoldoy has another specimen of Jati. Barsha Shimanta Honkordev Kolakhetra in Guwahati has two specimens, and Kapor, that is a barbed spear, has been exhibited in the same museum. Now, if we talk about the defensive weapon, there were three varieties of it. Sorry, if you talk about if you talk about the defensive weapons, and if you particularly talk about the shields, then there were three particular varieties of it. One was called dhal, another one was baru, and the third one was called for. Baru and for were being made using bamboo and cane, whereas dhal were made using animal hide. And they were also using a thick skin jacket, and it was called gati or jati. So there are two specimens of dhal exhibited in Assam State Museum in Guwahati. You can have a look at it. Now moving on, if you talk about weapons, then we also need to understand that the weapons were made using iron. So the question is, what are the ways through which the Ahom procured iron? So there were three particular ways. One was through indigenous mining and smelting, the second was through trade, and the third was through tribute. If you talk about the indigenous mining and smelting, there are three particular regions where mining and smelting occurred during the Ahom period. One was in the Tirugao Hill and Hatigor. Tirugao Hill, that is Tiru Hill, is in present day Nagaland. But back in the Ahom period, it used to be an integral part of that region used to be an integral part of the Ahom kingdom. So the first is Tirugao Hill and Hatigor. The second region is the Bosa and Doyang region, where iron was being obtained from ferruginous clay, and the third was in the riverbank of Sufrai River. The other sources used to be trade. So through trade, the Ahoms were engaged in brisk trade with various ethnic groups, such as the Miris in the Mikir Hill, the Khasis and the Garos in the Khasi Jaintia Hill, the Kunung of Barkhamti region in Burma. So among this, the Khasis used to have the lion's share in trading with the Ahoms, particularly with pig iron. So the Khasis used to offer pig iron to the Ahom, and in return, the Ahoms used to offer them silk and other commodities that were being cultivated in the plains. Lastly, we have the tribute. Through tribute as well, the Ahoms procured pig iron, particularly from the Dimasa kingdom. As I mentioned before, the Ahoms entered into conflict with the Dimasa kingdom, and when the Dimasas lost the battle in 1536 CE, they started to offer tribute in various articles to the Ahom. And among those very tributary articles, there were edge weapons such as the Nakoida and also pig iron. This was in very brief a short summary of the book. Of course, there are many more things that can be covered, but I can understand there is a limitation of time, and I'm also tired. So this is some of the selected bibliography that have been used for this presentation. Thank you everyone for providing me this very platform, this prestigious platform, for making a very small demonstration of the work that has been done. And I'd also like to welcome all of you to Assam. Please visit Assam. You can see the image of Shiv Dol, Devi Dol, and Vishnu Dol in this particular image in Sibsagar. It was been constructed by Prathameshwari, Queen Prathameshwari, the chief queen of Ahom monarch, Shiva Simha. So this is the beauty of Ahom architecture. So please visit Sibsagar, Rangpur, Saraidev, which has been recently been made the UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can visit all those very places. You can visit the museums as well. So we welcome you all to come and visit Assam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sauradeep. It was really a wonderful book review. It felt like we were actually present in the museum and watching those weapons. Thank you so much. With your permission, can we take some questions?
Yes, sure, please. I'm well.
Of course. Okay. So, first question is by Nandan sir itself. The question is, who is generally regarded most powerful Ahom ruler? Sukhu, what is Sukhurunga
Sukunfa.
Gupta? Okay. Tell us briefly about his role. That's the question.
Well, first of all, sir, it's a very tricky question. When we ask who is the most powerful, it's a very tricky question. And if I say the Sukunfa was the most powerful, then I might get a sword over my neck. So there will be many who would say that no, it's not Sukhumfa. It might be Suhumu who would be the most powerful one. Why? Because he was the one who not only expanded the Ahom kingdom but also consolidated it. But some other might say that Susingfa would be the most powerful because it was under his aegis that the Ahoms defeated the Mughals for the first time in the naval battle of Samdhara in 1616. So it's a very tricky question. Then again, we can also say that Rudasima perhaps was the most powerful, while others must say that no, Sivasima was the most powerful. Why? Because during his reign, the Ahom kingdom expanded to its highest, to its zenith, and they also reached the architectural marble, just like the image that I have shown. So it's a very tricky question, sir. But if I have to pick my own favorite, then I can give you a solid answer to that.
All right.
I hope that answers your question, but it is a more diplomatic answer, I would say, sir.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much. There are multiple questions by Manali. Were these boat drops primarily defensive weapons used in fortifications, or were they also mobile enough to be deployed in battlefield situations? That's our first
Both,
question.
both. They were
Okay.
used as defensive purposes as well. So we have multiple forts, and forts were called gore in Assamese. So
Okay.
they used to install this very top over the gore itself, over the fort itself. Or, however, there are also multiple evidences to suggest that they were also actively used in combat. For example, in the navy, there were boats that were being laden with helois, with cannons, not heavy artillery, but light artillery were being utilized. So, for instance, there is also reference. If you go to the work of Dr. S.K. Bhuya, Lasit Borfukan at his time, there a complete detail of the Battle of Saraigat has been mentioned. Battle of Saraigat that occurred in 1671. So, in that very Battle of Saraigat, there are references that multiple gore or forts were being raised, and in those very forts, cannons were being mounted. So, for defensive purposes as well as for offensive purposes, the artillery were being utilized.
Thank you so much. So, our next question is: are there inscriptions, decorative motifs, or symbols on these weapons that provide clues about their makers, patterns, or intended use
Oh
on the
yes,
weapon?
definitely. Definitely. Oh yes. If you remember the first image that I show, uh, that was been installed in Sipsagar, Talatalgarh in Sipsagar. In those cannon, each of those very cannons have inscription where the name of the maker and to whom it was been given to, the name of the monarch were been written. The inscription were not only written in Assamese, some of the inscription were also written in Persian as well. If you visit Assam State Museum, you can see the cannons, some of the cannons having inscription in Persian. So there are inscriptions uh, which speaks about the maker and to whom it was been donated, etc. So in one of the cannons, Bohikoa, the name of the Bohikoa Fukan has been mentioned. Right. So I hope that answers the query.
Yes. So I have a question. So, despite possessing a strong military system and advanced weaponry, why did Ahoms didn't expand to other regions of the nation, other regions of the India? I mean, they could have done it. Was there any particular problem?
Now that is a difficult question. Even I have not thought about it. First of all, they did expanded their kingdom. That is for sure. But expansion where? Expansion in the east and expansion in the west as well. And let us look at the geopolity of the medieval Assam. The Ahom were towards their west was having Koch kingdom. So the Koch kingdom used to be the buffer between the Mughal, that is the mainstream Bharat, and the Ahom kingdom. And in the east, there used to be Sotia kingdom, and in the south of the Brahmaputra Valley, there used to be Dimasa kingdom. So the Ahoms were expanding, but they were also likely to maintain a buffer zone between them and the Mughals. and therefore they thought never to extend beyond that region, that is beyond North Bengal. North Bengal used to be the political center of the Koch kingdom. So they maintained that very buffer, and therefore they never entered into entered beyond the Koch themselves. But they were expanding. There are multiple references where the Ahoms were engaged with the Koch kingdom itself. There are also references when they were expanding towards the northern bank of the river Brahmaputra, where they were engaged in conflict with the Miri ethnic groups or the Sotia kingdom. And in the south, they were expanding against the Dimasa kingdom. And they were also in active combat with the Nara people of Myanmar. So there was expansion. And the Ahoms were playing a very active role in the national geopolitics as well. And hence we have multiple references. Well, I was not able to cover many things, right? I was not able to cover the list of battles that the Ahoms were fighting against the Turko-Afghan as well as the Mughals. So there are multiple evidences, and they were playing multiple role, and they were playing this very active role in national politics as well. So I hope this answers the question partially.
Yes. There is another question by Manali. Unlike temples or monuments, weapons are often made of materials prone to corrosion and deterioration. What are the biggest challenges in preserving military artifacts?
Well, for that, I would say I'm not an expert in this very area. There are many conservationists who are working with the museum. My own friend, my good friends, Ontorim Talukdar is the chief conservationist over in Assam State Museum, Guwahati. So they are expert in this very field who know how to make the conservation work. I'm really very sorry, but I have very less knowledge on this aspect.
That's completely fine. So, those were the main questions which we had today. So, Vinay sir, if you want to add any question or anything before we come to the end of the session.
Oh, it is okay, Nidhi.
Okay, sir. So now I request Nandan sir to express his views regarding the book review. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible, Nidhi?
Yes, sir. Yes, you are.
Mr. Nath, this is background in archaeology and museology from Assam University. We just now on both academic rigor and a passion for Northeast India's heritage. For the history enthusiasts, this work invites deeper appreciation of how the Ahom's military innovations and material traditions contributed to one of the longest surviving kingdoms in Indian history, blending indigenous knowledge with strategic borrowing in a dynamic frontier region. It is a valuable addition to any collection on Indian military history of Assam's past. And this book fills a key gap in scholarship by providing detailed descriptive study and analysis of surviving Ahom weapons preserved in museums across Assam. Sauradeep, in the month of September last year, 2025, I had a great opportunity to visit Assam State Museum, and Talukadar, your friend, took us around the museum. All the delegates of IESC 54th annual conference. A standout contribution is Nath's novel classification of these artifacts. Weapons of indigenous Ahom origin, those acquired as tribute from neighboring groups, and those collected as war booty, such as Mughal talwars. This framework illuminates the Ahom's interactions with other ethnic communities and kingdoms through exchange, tribute, and conflict. Additional dimensions explored include the procurement of raw materials like iron ore and pig iron via indigenous smelting trade and tribute, which supported local weapon manufacturing. The text also evaluates perspectives on the Aham's early adoption of firearms and gunpowder, likely predating certain colonial narratives and influenced by interactions with kingdoms like the Chutia and Dimasa in the late 15th century. This underscores their technological adaptability and self reliance through high quality illustrations and museum based documentation. The book brings to life the material culture of Ahom warfare, connecting artifacts to broader themes of state formation, diplomacy, and cultural resilience in medieval Northeast India. It appeals strongly to history enthusiasts, military historians, archaeologists, and anyone interested in India's lesser highlighted regional legacies. Astu.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nandan sir. So we have come to the end of the session. Before that, Sauradeep, any advice for the history enthusiasts? I mean, because we have a lot of youngsters in the group, so any suggestion for them particularly?
Follow your passion. If you think you are good at something, keep on working. Follow your passion. What I did is, what I did was follow my passion. I wanted to study weapons, even though I had no idea, but I kept working on it, kept building on it, and eventually things happened. Eventually, I was able to write a thesis, publish some papers, as well as the book. So I would only say that follow your passion to all the youngsters. You may not see result in one day. You may not see the result the other day, but eventually you will see result. And when it does, when you start to see result, don't be affectionate towards it. Think of it as a grace, as God's grace. Do not think that it's your work, or else all the fame and all the glory will distort your mind. So cultivate that. Be passionate, but be detached as well. And in that way, you can build yourself, build your mind, and not just body, build your mind as well. And you will be successful in your life.
Thank you so much for beautiful advice. So now I request Dr. Vinay Kumar sir to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Yeah. Good evening to all of you. As the academic series of our history enthusiast, so I am very much delighted to extend the vote of thanks that we know that today we have seen the book discussion by Dr. Sauradeep Nathji, and he has highlighted and tried to just draw our attention to the most fascinating dimension of the history. I would like to say that the fascinating history, that is the history of the warfare, military organization, and the material culture. And we have known that the wars have always shaped the kingdoms, redrawn the frontiers, which he has already narrated through his slides as well as through his lecture in the discussion, and that has influenced the course of the history. And this, beyond the battles and the victories, there lies the various questions of the technology, strategy, as well as the craftsmanship, logistics, and the everyday realities of the people who fought in these wars. Weapons are not merely the instruments of the war, and they also are historical artifacts that reveal the political, social, as well as the cultural world that produced them. So, in this endeavor, the illustrated legacy of this Ahom military by Dr. Sauradeep Nathji was really a really illustrated work that examined the military tradition of the Ahom kingdom and offered fresh insight into the remarkable chapter of the Indian history. So I am very much thankful on behalf of history enthusiasts, on behalf of our president, sir, on behalf of vice president, on behalf of all the participants, to really to Dr. Saurabdeep Nathji for illuminating us on this fascinating aspect of our history. I am also thankful to Dr. Nandan Sastri sir, who is the Honorable President of our History Enthusiast Group and who has always been a source of inspiration for all of us. And he is the person who is always motivating us to organize this kind of academic activities which we are trying to do. And most respectfully, I would like to extend my thank to Nidhi Kattiji, who is our former this founder vice president of our history enthusiast group, and she is always active and she is always leading. Similarly, I would also like to thank Manali Mamaya ji and all other participants who have taken part in this illustrated this lecture by the book discussion by Nathji. And at the end, I extend my thankfulness to all of them who has made this program a great success. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for proposing
Thank you,
the vote
sir.
of
Thank you for the kind words. Thank you. I'd like to thank the history enthusiasts, Nidhi ji, Nandan ji, Vinay ji, Manali ji. Thank you. Thank you everyone for giving me this very platform to share what I have so far documented. It's a privilege, and thank you. Uh, I think the reason I'm standing here today is because of the teachers that I have had so far. They have groomed me, and I think in this way I can do justice to my motherland by bringing this very research before the entire Bharat. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So we are signing off here. Please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel and the video. We will come up with another session and it will be updated to you through WhatsApp, Instagram, and other social media platforms of the history enthusiasts. Thank you so much, everyone.